Picture this, a struggling freelancer with $8 to her name. On a random Tuesday night, she gets fined over $100. Her crime? Buying a $10 meal for her children. After busting ass at various freelance jobs for a week, Bobby Dempsey finally receives a check of $200. And like any mother would, she takes her kids out for a meal to finally treat them from the canned tuna and rice they've been eating for months. What Bobby didn't know was that the bank was still holding her $200 payment for 3 days. This causes her account to go into overdraft. And since she didn't notice right away, every hour her bank charged her $10, costing her to lose half of her money. And for what? Failing to realize that the bank was so shit that it couldn't clear the payment for 3 whole days? The money was there. The bank just couldn't process the damn payment because it was Martin Luther King Day. Sadly, this story is just one of millions of cases of banks behaving like literal parasites, turning a seemingly innocent lending practice into one of their main weapons of financial slavery, and then aiming it directly at the poor. If you're not disgusted yet, wait until you find out why you are funding this regime. When most people think of Scotland, they picture something like this.
How many of you hail from the fair city of Edinburgh?
But beyond the kilts and bagpipes, Scotland was also the home of an 18th century businessman named William Hogg. Despite being in business for decades, William found himself dangerously close to broke. In the 1700s, payments were slower than a snail on crutches, which for William meant he had a better chance of teaching his pet rock to fetch than making his payments on time. But instead of just taking the L, he decides to head down to the Royal Bank of Scotland and ask them if he could withdraw more money than he had in his account. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? Luckily for William, the bank actually accepts his request. They agree to allow him to withdraw more money than he has, so long as he promised to pay them back once he has the cash, plus a fee, of course. In other words, they gave him a loan. Seemed insignificant at the time, but this changed the banking industry forever. See, the banks realized that millions of other businesses just like Williams struggle with cash flow, and all of them could be potential customers for this type of loan. A loan that was automatically taken whenever their account ran out of money. They decided to make it the new standard, creating a system that would make it so anyone who opened an account would automatically be signing up for these kinds of loans, aka overdraft fees, conveniently hidden in those terms and conditions that we all definitely read. Not long after, the banks were rolling in it. By the 1990s, they started introducing this feature to all individuals' bank accounts. It was no longer just businesses struggling with cash flow that were signing up to these expensive loans. It was everyone. Single mothers, struggling families, teenagers, homeless people, hell, even the fake people that Wells Fargo created to hit internal sales quotas. But this wasn't a way to ease cash flow issues like it was for businesses. It was a way to charge the poor for being poor. How fucked up is that? Now, almost all personal bank accounts allow payments to go through, even if the person doesn't have enough money for it. That way, the banks can charge that person $35. The bank's fee varies, but the corruption is still the same. For some comparison, the government pays $35 to borrow $850 for 10 whole years, the same price that banks charge poor people for borrowing a few dollars for as little as a couple of minutes. Today, several of the world's largest banks have reported making more than $1 billion annually just from overdraft fees alone, while some smaller banks have admitted that overdraft fees account for over 20% of their entire earnings. We're talking about a $1 trillion industry that is taking over $11 billion a year from the poorest members of society. To those who have everything, everything will be given. For those who have nothing, everything will be taken. The Bible says it, and the banks are doing it. They're taking from those who have literally nothing.
You can't keep getting away with it!
why do they keep getting away with this? The banks aren't stupid. They're so devious that now they've engineered another layer to this scam just to sell people a whole new solution, and it's called Overdraft Protection. So let's get this straight. Banks force you to borrow from them instead of just declining your transactions, charge you a $35 fee for doing it, and then say, hey, if you don't want to take out your accidental loan, you can pay us $5 a month to protect yourself from our predatory overdraft fees? But why? Why does the population allow this to happen? Over the years, the general public has slowly been forgetting a fundamental principle that we once knew all too well. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. The earliest recorded writing isn't something from a religious text or an account of ancient wisdom. It's a record of debt. Debt has been around since before writing, originally in the form of unwritten social convention. But eventually, debt would develop into the highly complex financial instruments used today by the elite. But how did we get to this point? The early world of caves and campfires required us to work hard for our meals.
What are you do?
Me and they have many hunter. Me all together.
You hunter-gatherer.
These days, many.
As hunter-gatherers, we intuitively knew that because resources such as food were scarce, we must work to acquire them. We understood that we can't just eat now and hunt later. You need to put in the work before you can reap the rewards. But as time went on and humans became more and more divorced from the pursuit of food and shelter, we ended up sheltering ourselves from reality instead. And somewhere along the lines, building our bubble-wrapped world of pumpkin-spiced lattes and underfloor heating, we started taking things for granted. We began asking for more handouts and free lunches, relying more and more on debt as the backbone of our game of smoke and mirrors. Debt became so heavily relied upon that it could be weaponized. And once weaponized, it became the invisible front lines of modern colonialism and wealth concentration. Developing countries have their productive capacity routinely harvested by loan sharks on the global stage, from the likes of the IMF and World Bank. Debt becomes one of the primary causes of World War II. Hitler literally started it by invading Austria for the pursuit of gold, the only form of money that wasn't, well, more debt. The poorest countries routinely export goods and services to wealthier countries at a discount. The entire system is inflated by people trying to spend the same dollar twice. And 2008 showed us a glimpse of what happens when the house of cards falls down. The most vulnerable die. It's said that when the aristocracy catches a cold, the working class dies of pneumonia. And that's because the parasitic pushers of debt can always make someone else pay the cost of their delusion. And that someone else is not their friends or family or the government, it's us, the people. But why do we allow this to happen? Why do you allow this? Because your rights are everyone else's responsibility. They take your autonomy and give you rights in return. When you take the right to go into overdraft, you sacrifice some of your responsibility over to the bank. You give them a little piece of yourself and they squeeze it for all it's worth. But overdraft fees are just one example of this. When you use the traditional financial system, you're being granted the right to do that by the system's creators. And in return, you're making them responsible for your money. Try to send money to a Bitcoin exchange in the US, and you'll see how much of your financial autonomy they have seized. This is why it's so important to have sovereignty over the fruits of your labor, aka your money. The modern financial system is essentially just a bunch of nested spreadsheets managed by people in suits and Patagonia vests. A handful of organizations dictate that direction of the entire economy, which means you're likely directed by those organizations more than you realize. Whether or not your business succeeds has much less to do with merit, but more to do with the access you're granted to financial resources by those in control of them. Not to mention the ability to practically bring the whole economy to a halt just by tightening some of their policies. With Bitcoin, you take full responsibility for your money. No stimulus checks, no government intervention, no surveillance or invasion of privacy, and definitely no overdraft fees. If you run out, you can't spend more. It's simple. But you also won't end up like Bobby Dempsey over here, having over half of your paycheck taken by bankers, many of which had direct business dealings with child sex traffickers. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Jamie. With Bitcoin, you're at the wheel. It's a public good shared and protected by all of us. Does it imply a lot of responsibility? Sure. But mom ain't raised no bitch. Instead of skimming terms and conditions at a bank, you have to put in the work to actually get Bitcoin. There's a lot of books, there's probably too many podcasts, but that's a good thing. Every day we make a choice between ownership and being owned, between freedom and safety, between hard truths and sugar-coated lies. You can't divorce ownership from responsibility. They're two sides of the same coin. Everything comes at a cost, even money. You either make your own money or you help them make theirs. The choice is yours to live your own life or play a part in theirs.
My question for you, Mr. Diamond, is how should she manage this budget shortfall while she's working full-time at your bank?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Would you recommend that she take out a JP Morgan Chase credit card and run a deficit?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
Would you recommend that she overdraft at your bank and be charged overdraft fees?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
Mr. Diamond, you know how to spend $31 million a year in salary, and you can't figure out how to make up a $567 a month shortfall. This is a budget problem you cannot solve.
Bitcoin itself is a hyped up fraud. It's a pet rocket.
You're back to that?
Yeah,
Really?
Of course, yeah.